Jane Coppa is closing our show today. Jane actually lives in Delray Beach, Florida, which is not close, and she comes up to Connecticut every month for work. She scheduled her February trip to coincide with this workshop and stayed extra long in order to do that, and we're so glad that she did. Jane helps to manage her family's real estate business, which was founded by her amazing father, who you're going to hear about. She says that when she's not working, she enjoys her family, good friends, good conversation, and learning more about the things that interest her. Jane says that because she is the most likely to run screaming out of the room today, because she's terrified of telling her story in public, she should receive the Academy Award for signing up to do two things that frighten her the most, and that's public speaking and talking about herself. You guys are going to find that Jane is going to do that with expertise and aplomb right now. Please welcome Jane Coppa.
I think this will be fine.
Yep.
Yes. I am in Boca Raton, Florida, and my mom and dad have just bought their first winter vacation home, and I'm visiting for the very first time. We're out by the pool, and it is a beautiful day. The sun is shining, the water is sparkling, everything is glistening, everything is just perfect. My survivor dad is having the time of his life. He's showing his adored family how he picks oranges and grapefruits from the trees that pepper his backyard. The tool that he's using is a long, skinny piece of apparatus that grabs the fruit, he shuts it tight, and then he pulls it down. He's very good at what he does. I forgot to tell you what he's wearing. He's wearing a brand new silly Boca outfit. It's as if he went into a store and he bought everything that says, "I now live in South Florida." And he put it all on at one time. But he's having such fun, and he is so proud, showing his adored family his new skill. I'm watching this absolutely perfect scene. It's perfect. Nothing is wrong in the world. Everything is just right. And my same old pressing and very important questions come to mind. Dad, how do you do that? Why are you so happy? How are you so happy? What the heck are you thinking right now? And Dad, how did you go from there to here? My dad was born in Makowa, Poland. On September 1st, 1939, the Nazis marched into his town, and life would never, ever, ever be the same. He was immediately put to work. His job was picking up raw sewage with his bare hands. The Gestapo would not allow him to wear gloves. It was backbreaking work. When he occasionally got sick and needed to stop for a moment, he was severely beaten. At the end of a very long day, he would walk home to his parents' home, and they would wait in the window for him. And he was so ashamed to let them see what had become of him. He was dirty. He was beaten. He was a mess. Later on, he was sent to a labor farm. At the farm, he was hungry, he was cold. All the boys were hungry and cold. They were given one meal a day. It consisted of weak soup, a crusty piece of bread, and very, very watered down tea or coffee. He could never quite remember what it was. 8 boys decided that they were not going to survive these conditions, and they determined that they were going to run away. So one night they dug underneath the wall of the cabin, dug and dug and dug, and then they all crawled out, waited by the wall, and then started to run. Shots fired out, and 5 of the boys didn't make it. My dad never looked back. He never knew what happened behind him. He just kept going, and he walked all the way home and was reunited with his family again. The next day, the Gestapo came looking for him. His parents hid him under the floorboards in the root cellar, and as he lay on his back, he could hear his mom and dad saying, he's not here, I don't know where he is. And he heard the Gestapo guys saying, tell us where he is, you're gonna get in trouble, he's gonna get in trouble. He was absolutely terrified, hearing those boots just march over the boards constantly. They didn't find him and they left the house. When he came out, his parents were defeated. There wasn't anything more they could do for him, and they told him so. That night, they told him he needed to leave the house, and he cried, and he cried, and he cried, and they cried. But they said, Shimon, you need to leave. So that night, they packed him up, they put a little bit of money in his jacket, and off he went into the snow. My grandparents' last words to him were, Shimon, stay clean and don't get sick. My grandfather's last words to him were, Shimon, never forget who you are and where you came from. He ran to Russia, first to Lumzha, then to Pinsk, then to Minsk, then to Stalingrad. While in Stalingrad, he was drafted into the Soviet Army, and his job was delivering supplies to the front line. It was bad, bad, and more bad. There was no food, there was no clothing, there was no heat, there was illness everywhere, and people were dropping like flies. A lot of death. One day, he complained about the food in the army. And one day, he complained about the lack of clothes and the lack of supplies. And I guess you don't do that in the Soviet Army. Because he was arrested, he was tried, he was convicted and sentenced to 3 years hard labor in a Siberian gulag. So off he went to his next adventure. My father did tell me once that every situation he was in during the war was very bad. But when he would leave that particular situation and go on to another one, his hope was it would always be better. But that was never the case. He would always get there and I wish I could go back one step. I wish I could go back 2 steps. That was the case in Siberia. It was very, very hard. My dad was not given boots to wear, so he wore socks only, and the way he tried to keep his feet warm was to wrap rags and rags and rags around his feet, dip the rags in water, and the ice that formed instantaneously was meant to insulate the warmth around his feet. Very fortunately for him, mid-1945, the war ended, and he was released from Siberia after only being there 11 months. He had survived the war years. Those were his war years. He went on to have a very full, happy, and productive life. But I always had so many questions for my father. Always, 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 as long as I can remember. And I wonder if my dad remembers the holidays that we had. Our table was always full of so much food. We had challah, we had brisket, we had turkey, we had strudel, we had simmus. It was wonderful, and the kids would be running around, everything was great. And I would be sitting there watching him at the head of the table, and I would be wondering, what are you thinking about, Dad? Are you remembering your parents? Are you remembering your 3 sisters and your 1 brother that were murdered? Are you wondering why they're not here running around? Because I am. And what about all this food, this plentiful food? What do you think about all of that after your years of hunger? And Dad, do you remember the time when you were shoveling snow with your son Michael, and he accidentally hit you with the shovel right between the eyes, and you just stood up said nothing for a little bit of time, and then you just bent down and started to shovel again. Well, my question was, how do you do that, Dad? What are you thinking? What are you thinking? What's going on in that head? How does it feel? And another time I remember is when I was 12 years old, and I drove my dad while he slept in the front seat all the way to New Haven. Yes, I was 12. I was driving a very long, gray 1961 Cadillac with the top down while he slept. But as I was having so much fun, I felt so special, and I felt so very cool. I would look at the blue sky, and I would think, is it possible that this blue sky is the same blue sky that saw all that misery and all that horror and all that evil? Is that even possible? And then I would look over at my dad and I would say, what are you dreaming about, Dad? Are you thinking about the same things I'm thinking about? I never knew. Fast forward, my dad was 93 years old, coming to the end of his life, and he was very sick and he was very tired, and he was sleeping a lot. One afternoon, he was mumbling tomatoes, potatoes, apples, over and over and over again. And then, for some unknown reason, he started to mumble potatoes, tomatoes, and he would do that over and over again. And it was just like I was back in Boca with all my questions. Dad, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? How do you do that? Why are you so peaceful right now? And Dad, how did you get from there to here? My dad had a wonderful life. It was long. He was full of joy. He lived in a community that he loved. He worked hard. He loved his business. He had lots of appreciation and a lot of gratefulness for the blessings that had come his way. His family was very important to him. My grandfather would be very, very proud of him. He never did forget who he was and where he came from. Dad, yes, you never answered my questions. And Dad, yes, you never told me everything you were thinking, but you did so much more. You loved me. You showed me how to live a good life. You showed me how to always do the best that I can do.